So I was originally going to VCU for botanical illustration and scientific illustration. I was in the communication arts program. And one day I was walking through the halls of one of the, buildings, and I saw a flyer that Loose Screw, this shop, needed a marketing intern. And I was like, sure, why not? Because I was already getting tattooed at that point. And I wanted to just work in the environment and see what it was like, because I thought I was going to do graphic design. But I started working here as an intern, and I quickly got hired as a receptionist, and then I just didn't want to leave. I loved working in the environment so much, and I loved seeing what living like a tattoo artist was like, and I just fell in love with it, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I could still use my degree, so the student debt wasn't a total waste. I think there's a sense of freedom in it as an artist, for sure. I think tattooing and modification, you get such creativity with it. I can draw kind of whatever I want. But I also got into it because I loved the idea of working one-on-one with a client. Someone brings me an idea, they want to express something in a certain way, they want to tell a story, and how can I use my art to do that for them? And just share the joy of self-expression on skin that way. So I'm very inspired by fantasy and fantasy illustration. So I love whimsy and the cottagecore vibe, and it's just something that I just naturally am drawn towards. So I like to share that art and draw that way. My style that I tattoo is mostly illustrative black and gray. I use a lot of dot work. I use a lot of high contrast black and white to create the images. I don't do a lot of color. I do a lot of botanical illustration because that's what I'm trained in and I love. Ooh, that's a hard question. I've seen some really cool tattoos in my, short time in this industry. I can say my favorite kind that I commonly see, I love when women in particular have really dense black, geometric back pieces, or big tattoos that take up a lot of space. I love seeing women with big tattoos. Because usually I think it's a stereotype that women try to get dainty tattoos, and I just love a big tattoo. I would say living in Richmond, we're very, very lucky because Richmond is such a heavily tattooed town. So I feel like we don't deal with a lot of stigma here because everyone has tattoos. However, if I drive 2 hours in any direction outside of Richmond, it definitely changes. I just ignore it personally because I don't really care. I don't know. I guess it's about what you think of, what people think of you. I think it's going away. I think we're seeing less and less of it. I think that demographic that maybe had an issue with tattoos is slowly fading out. We're just becoming more accepting of people who do have tattoos. I have been at Loose Screw for, it will be 7 years next March. So in a couple months, it'll be 7 years. And I love it here. I mean, I worked here for 3 years before I even started tattooing, just because I loved the atmosphere and I just loved working in a tattoo shop. This year was my third or fourth year doing the Richmond show. I want to say fourth, I could be wrong. I love the Richmond show. It's one of my favorite tattoo shows just because it's in a hotel. So everyone, all the clients and the artists are staying in the same place. It's just like a mini community for 3 days. It is very crowded and very stressful. And I have to do some deep breathing and wear some headphones. But other than that, it's a great time. The caliber of artists there is incredible. I mean, some of my favorite tattoo artists that I've looked up to for years go every year, and I get to meet them and buy their art and pick their brain, and it's a really great time. And it's great to go and, if you're not getting tattooed, there's still a lot to do. We have food trucks, fire performances, comedy acts. It's a really good time. We own it. We used to co-own it with another shop, but as of recently, we fully took it on. So it's ours now. And it's awesome. It's chaos around here during convention season, oh my goodness, but it's so fun.
But back then, tattoos were really a sign of rebellion. I mean, it was a permanent fuck you to everybody in the world. It's changed over the years. I've been tattooing for 30 years, and I've been around tattooing since '87. So again, when I first started getting in, it was very much military, bikers. I mean, the old tattoo saying is bikers, sailors, and whores. That was who got tattooed back then. And as bad as that sounds, that really was it. You didn't see people walking around with tattoos like you do now. So it was definitely way of saying I'm not like you. Broad Street in 93 was not the Broad Street you see now. Broad Street back then used to be rough. Gray Street used to be rough. So I started hanging out in a tattoo shop called Rock and Roll Tattoo that was on Broad Street down by VCU. Just helping out, you know, answering questions or whatever when I could, and doing it to get tattooed because I was a broke student. But back then it was also all flash. It was really rare that somebody came in and said, I want you to design this. People walked in, looked at the stuff hanging on the walls and went, I want that one. You tattooed it. Tattooing was different back then. Things were starting to change, but they hadn't changed yet. There's a big difference between tattooing and piercing, and then there's another difference between that before the more extreme modifications. You have people out there doing amputations as body modifications. Insertions, where they're inserting silicone or surgical steel into their skin to create patterns or bumps or raised areas or horns. And that's a totally different thing than the normal day-to-day tattooing and body piercing thing. Tongue splitting, penile piercing, penis splitting, and they've been around for a while. Piercing started in the LGBTQ and BDSM scene in the 80s. That's its origins in this country. Now, most of the piercings date back to thousands of years ago in China or Africa. That's most of where they come from. How adult do you want this to be? You know the alien facehugger? The things that jump out of the pods in the movies? Tattooed that on a girl's crotch. And the tail went all the way up her ass, curled around her hip, and came up her side. And when I say crotch, I mean inside a thigh, full coverage, all the way up. Now, before that runs rampant, she was somebody I knew. She wasn't a stranger who walked in off the street. I tattooed her multiple times before. She was her own person. And we had enough of a rapport that she trusted me to tattoo that area, and I had enough trust in her for her to understand what she was getting involved in and how close we were going to end up being through that process. That's not a normal thing. But I don't have that was probably that's the one that gets everybody. To me, I don't really think any of them are weird. Probably about 20 years ago, I was talking to another artist, somebody who was much older than me. And he was the one who told me that we are ghostwriters for somebody else's story. And I really, truly believe that. So weird or any of that isn't my job to decide or judge. It isn't my job to think about. You want whatever, I'll do it. I've tattooed every part of the human body you can think of on both sexes, and I don't care. You know, you'll get some tattoo artists like, oh, I'll tattoo a girl here, but I won't tattoo a guy here, or I won't do this, or I won't. It's skin. It's not personal. If you take it that way, if you think about it that way, you have the issue, not them. Yeah, I don't think about it as weird. You know, even her request, I thought it was amusing. I thought it was funny, but knowing her, no, that makes sense.
I think body modification to me is kind of in the all the above category. I think it's self-expression, certainly, but it can be a lot of things. I'm a bit of a history nerd. If you look back at different things cultures across the world have done over the years, they had many different reasons to modify their body. So I don't think it's something that you can say is one thing or another. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how a practice that's been around for millennia can feel or be labeled as a more new age trend. But I think we're a species with amnesia, and we forget a lot of things. And something that seems new and radical now may have been very regular for our ancestors. So your grandfather that thinks your tattoos and piercings are insane, 10 generations before him, they were probably completely body modded. There's no shortage of strange requests I've received from clients. And I had a client, and I don't know how serious he was about it because I wasn't willing to do what he wanted me to do. But he wanted a Jacob's ladder that would be almost a Jacob's bridge between him and his partner. That would be a very temporary incident, like a very temporary piercing, not a permanent one. I've had a lot of really memorable moments piercing. I had been piercing about 1.5 years. I was at my tattoo shop. I was still fairly new. Had a teenager come in for a septum. Their mom had brought them in. They weren't being dramatic. They had some sensory things going on. And any little teeny thing we did was incredibly uncomfortable. But this person just pushed through and said, no, this is really important to me, And Me, the mom, and the kid all ended up crying by the end of it. It was such an emotional moment for this kid to get over all that pain and fear and their sensory development issues that they've had. So that one will always stick in my head.
Probably the first tattoo that I ever did on myself. It was the most nerve-wracking thing ever. But it still came out pretty good, I would say. My family was really against tattoos and any body modifications, so that put a lot of negativity on me in the family when I did get my tattoos and when I did decide to go into tattooing. I honestly feel like women with tattoos are a little over-sexualized. So sometimes when I promote myself at parties or clubs, men will look at me as a female tattoo artist and not even see me as an artist, but maybe just see me as a female.
I actually had some people around me that had tattoos when I was around 13, 14 years old, and then I got mine when I was about 15. My first tattoo, sorry. Scared to walk into a room, and then once I got my first one, it was like I was the only person in the room. That's what it felt like. I do micro-realism, very tiny tattoos. If I can pack as much detail into a small area, that's good for me. It has to be something that I have, and I have a dinosaur, a Bronchiosaurus, that has the head of a penis instead of a Bronchiosaurus head. So that's probably one of my favorite body modifications that I've seen. Definitely get a lot of bad reps from clients to the shop. A lot of people have bad experiences with tattoos. I have personally had horrible experiences with tattoos, and it draws you away from either that particular shop or that particular person that works in the shop. In some cases, it can even draw you away from getting a tattoo just in general. It ruins the whole experience for the rest of your life. That is a bad stigma that a lot of tattoo shops have because art is so subjective too. So the artist may really like the tattoo and the client may really not enjoy the tattoo at the end of the day. So having the conversation of design, stuff like that can get rid of any discrepancies that may come later on down the road. But a lot of bad reps, people just don't have a good experience or a good time while they're getting a tattoo, and that leads to us having bad names, bad shop names, a lot of stuff like that.
Favorite one? I would say anything that starts happening after someone has maybe their 5th tattoo. I would say, because I think when a walk-in comes in or if it's an appointment, depending on what someone wants, generally you can kind of tell if they have tattoos or not. Because the silly stuff comes after all the serious stuff. It's like when we first start out, we're so nervous, right? We're so geared up to not make a wrong decision, that we have to live with this forever, and we're all on edge. You get it done, and you're all right, cool. And you come back, you might still have this thought, but it wears away over time. And people will say tattoos are addicting because they are. We're oh my gosh, we're expressing ourselves, right? And we get addicted to that because we're yes, I feel good. You're in this shell and you're I'm decorating it. It's great. So I think as time goes on, people start, I guess, maybe thinking less about worries and more about art. And I think it takes a second to get to that art phase. And then that's when the cool pieces come in, where it's someone might, I want this dog with a party hat. That's probably not someone's first tattoo, right? So it could be, but generally speaking. So when you get to things like that, there's a lot more love and smiling, and the client is happy, and you kind of have more of a, I don't know, this line that you meet between client and artist, you know what I mean? And it's just a beautiful thing to have two people come together and make permanent art, and at that point, I think that's the best part of tattooing and pieces and anything you can do. I think it's hard to narrow it down to one. Again, I think ultimately it's this feeling of completion and happiness and just doing something for others and care when something is completed in a tattoo. I think the most rewarding feeling that you can't even really describe is when you finish a tattoo, someone goes to the mirror and they look and they're happy. And you're just I just permanently drew on another human. This art is going 6 feet under. Like, what beats that? It's like so permanent, and someone trusts another human that much. And it's a beautiful thing, because it's like, there's so much chaos in the world, you know, and what a wonderful thing when we can sit with another human being, trust them to do art on us, and then walk away and then talk about it after. And it's like there's a connection made. And I don't know, the concept of tattooing, when you really think about it, is so crazy. You know, like, we go in, we ask for something permanent, we have someone cut us essentially, and we bleed, and it hurts, and I don't know, but there's just so much joy in it, and I don't know, it's just such a great thing. It's like, I don't know, I'm in love.